Hi, this is Frank J. Avella with AwardsDaily. I'm here with our continuing series, Oscar Legends, where we profile iconic Academy Award winners and nominees. Today, I'm speaking with one of the most underrated actors of our time, and that is not hyperbole. Nominated for 4 Academy Awards for Cinderella Liberty, The Goodbye Girl, Chapter 2, and Only When I Laugh. She's also an accomplished stage actor and director. Welcome the extraordinarily gifted Marsha Mason. Hi, Marsha.
Oh, hi. How are you?
How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm good.
Good. Well, as I mentioned, I've spent the last week revisiting much of your work. I like to call it Marsha Week. You've given us so many indelible performances on stage, screen, and TV. When did you know that acting was going to be your path?
My freshman year in high school.
Wow.
Yeah, I got sort of drafted into a school production that my father also was in, and because it was a girls' school, and I had to play a Jack in the Box and pop up at a certain time. And when I did, there was a couple big rows of small children that were sitting down on the gymnasium floor, and they all went, oh, like that. And I knew from that moment on that that's what I wanted to do, was pop out of boxes.
That's pretty amazing. I know you've had quite an extraordinary stage career, which I want to discuss later. I want to start with your films. I can't find a copy of Hot Rod Hullabaloo anywhere. Did you buy up every print?
No, it was only shown in drive-ins, and it's black and white. Yeah. And that was, I guess you could say that, I think, was my very first professional film, was that one.
Do you remember your role?
Yes, I played Sheila, the bad girl. I wore a one-piece black bathing suit, and supposedly, I think I was trying to kill someone by throwing a stone or something. And it really was shot around a rink of demolition derby cars.
Oh my God. Well, I'm going to continue to look for it.
Somebody might have it, I don't know.
Well, it was Paul Mazursky's Bloom in Love that changed everything for you. What was that experience like, and how did it come about?
It was a kind of an interesting story. I had auditioned for it in New York City at the Sherry Netherlands Hotel, met Paul, read for him. I felt really good about the reading and thought, oh, maybe I'll have a chance at it. And then I took a trip for 1 week. I was doing a soap opera, One Life to Live, I believe. And I took a vacation, my first trip to Europe, which was London. And I was walking in Hyde Park. It was my first ever traveling alone. And George Segal, which I knew was in the film as the star, was walking with his then wife, and I went up to him, this complete girl, saying, "Oh, Mr. Segal, I auditioned for your movie. I so hope I get it." And he kind of backed away and was like a little taken aback and everything. I got back to New York, found out I did not get the film. So I was very disappointed. So I wound up, to make a long story shorter, I wound up going to ACT in San Francisco to do a summer tour of Private Lives that Francis Ford Coppola directed. And I was in LA. I came down afterwards, and my agent said, "Oh, you made a nice impression with Warner Brothers. Why don't you go to the studio, meet the casting people there?" and they set it up. So I did a dry run to find Warner Brothers. And I was sitting in the casting person's office, Nessa Hyams Picker, and she was just then Nessa Hyams. And her phone rings and she picks it up in the middle of our interview and she goes, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Okay, all right, yeah. Hangs up, said, look, you're going to take those back stairs to the second floor. Paul Mazursky's pulling his hair out because the actress that he hired wants to do another picture, and the part is available again. So I went up and I met Paul Mazursky again and read for him and got the role.
My God, right place, right time.
I know. I'm telling you, it's a sheer luck. I remember when I walked in the office, it was strewn with Bloom and Love scripts and everything, and I was feeling a little low and bad about it. But boom, there you go.
Amazing. And that led to Mark Rydell's Cinderella Liberty,
Yep.
which is a brilliant performance. Oh my God. Tell me about Maggie.
Well, it was really interesting. I wound up doing a season at ACT. Both pictures came out the same year. It was interesting because Mark came to see me, I think it was Doll's House at ACT, and I met with him. But when I opened the script, I was shocked that it was such a big role. I was assuming it was, a small role. And I wasn't exactly sure, how to approach it, and does he really want me? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. And, but I think the season at ACT and all the roles that I did that season really prepared me to do Maggie. So I was really a well-oiled working a machine. And because I was doing 5 leads in repertory in San Francisco and loving every minute of it, that to me was all I ever wanted to do, was to be in rep and, be a regular actress in an ensemble. And so who knew, and it was the powers that be at 20th who decided to rush it out at Christmas. Mostly, I think, probably because of Jimmy and Khan. And then it just was unbelievable to make a nomination.
Though there was something so special about it. And, 70s films in particular were allowed to be gritty and daring.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the script, though, ultimately does Maggie a little bit of a disservice because we fall for her and we root for her, and I just felt she deserved something more at the very end.
It was a very interesting conversation that I had with Mark about it, because in the interim between Bloom and Love, and although it was all the same year, I wound up being in a Broadway show, got married to Neil Simon after 3 weeks, and we go down to the public and see the early production of the chorus line. Oh. And in that early incarnation, she doesn't get into the chorus. And I said to Michael Bennett, I said, you can't do that. He said, but it's real. And Mark Rydell had said the same thing to me. He said, but it's life, it's real. I said, people do not go to the movies to get reflected back exactly what's terrible about life, which is despair and no hope. So I said, I really feel that she should make the chorus line.
So you're the reason Cassie actually makes the chorus line.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and you won a Golden Globe back then, and I wanted to ask you, what were the Globes like in 1970?
Well, I couldn't go to the first one for Cinderella Liberty because I was doing The Good Doctor, which was Neil's play where we met. So Mark accepted it for me. But I gather it was a drunken, wonderful event. And everybody never took it really terribly seriously, It wasn't on the caliber of the Academy Awards by any means. So I missed out on it. The second one for the Goodbye Girl, I did, and I had a great time. I had a wonderful time.
You presented with Peter O'Toole on that one. I watched it recently. Was he drunk? You kept feeding him lines.
Yeah, probably.
He was a genius, though, so it doesn't matter.
Not really. It was very exciting the first time with Cinderella Liberty when for the Academy Awards because Neil and I presented Best Adapted Screenplay, which was The Sting, and that was very exciting. Yeah.
It's interesting because with the Globe controversy, lately,
Oh yeah, yeah.
there's one thing I have to say. Historically, one thing they did do was they did recognize true talent in films that might have not have gotten the attention. So you got to give them credit for that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we're all in a learning curve. Every white person in the country is on a learning curve, and it is a curve that's difficult and painful at times, but necessary. Um, I was really taken by that, and I think that the film industry can do a great deal
Yeah.
to right the wrongs and to uh, repair and celebrate talent of any color.
Yeah. Well said. Cinderella Liberty was your first nomination, your Oscar nomination. Did you have any thoughts you might win that year?
No,
No.
no. Katharine Hepburn won. Come on.
And shortly after filming, you mentioned you did marry Neil real quick. And then you didn't act for a few years. And I wanted to get, because Neil's autobiography said, it makes it sound like you surprised him with the decision to stop acting, but you presented in a different way. I want to get the truth to this.
Well, no, Neil actually asked me to stop.
Okay.
And, but after we got married, so I honestly said to him, I was actually shocked. I really was. I was shocked. And I got scared and worried. But I'd made this commitment. I had two young daughters because his first wife had passed away at a young age. And so I took on the responsibility and I was really serious about it. And I was mad for him. I loved him. And to some extent, still do in terms of a part of my life that was really important and wonderful. But he did. He said, I can't be married to an actress. And a lot of this was because he had put off grieving the death of his first wife until after we got married.
Oh, God.
But so that first year was rough. It was tough and rough. But we came through it, and we moved to LA, and he wound up writing The Goodbye Girl for me. So, and then we had this incredible professional and personal, wonderful 10 years. And so, it all worked out.
Well, your next film was Robert Wise's Audrey Rose, and that was one of the very first few films that dealt seriously with reincarnation.
Yes.
How was that experience and working with Anthony Hopkins?
Oh, it was great. But Robert Wise, oh my God, I learned a great deal from him. I mean, because I was curious. He was such an incredible director, and he had started out as a editor, and and did famous films. as an editor. And the subject matter interested me because since the 60s, I'd been fascinated by Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion. In fact, a lot of religions, Judaism, Christian Science. As an avocation, I read a lot about religion. And so the reincarnation thing, I got really interested in, and that was basically the reason I wound up doing it, and the fact that it was Robert Wise. Tony was a surprise and a fabulous addition to it. That was really cool.
Right. Then came The Goodbye Girl. But what fascinates me is it started life as another film entirely, one that started filming but was then abandoned. Bogart Slept Here, directed by Mike Nichols and with Bobby De Niro. Can you shed some light on that project?
Well, there was a level of competitive personalities in Mike and Neil. They had a big history together. They had a great deal of success together. But Mike perceived the material differently than Neil did. He saw it more as this is Bogart Slept Here. Neil originally wrote it in a way because of Dustin Hoffman, because Dustin lived down the street from us in that first couple years we were married, and I was living in his house on 62nd Street, and Dustin was down the street. And the whole idea of how The Graduate came to be, Mike plucking this unknown actor from an off-Broadway show to make a lead in a major film. And so that was the genesis of Bogart Slept Here, about a happy New York actor with a family who gets plucked out of, the unknown into a famous film with a famous director. And Mike saw it as a comment, in a way, on Hollywood. For example, I remember there was this moment we got to a location, and the house, everything in the house, everything around the house, everything was painted yellow. And Neil was like, I don't know what movie this is. And in the midst of it all, Bobby De Niro had just come off of Taxi Driver. And I mean, I think he finished on Saturday and we were shooting or rehearsing on Monday. So his energy and his being was still a little bit in the Taxi Driver mode, and consequently, what happened was, along with this, at the same time as we were getting ready to shoot, Mike's picture, The Fortune, opened, and it wasn't a success. And I remember Mike saying to Neil in the back of the theater, we were standing at that Century Plaza movie complex, I think, and he said, I don't know what's wrong with it. And it really threw him. And I don't think he did another picture until Meryl Streep and then,
Silkwood?
Yeah.
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 Wow.
And for a while, we were going to continue with Bogart Slept Here, but Neil suddenly realized that it wouldn't be successful because he said nobody is really interested in a successful character. So he said Richard had asked to audition for it. At least this is what he told me. He had asked to audition for it when we were recasting, and Mike said no. And So when Mike left the project, and we were still thinking of doing it with, I think, Howard Z for somebody, he came and read, and there was this immediate crazy chemistry between Dreyfus and I. I never met him before. We were sitting in a little room on the Columbia lot, just the four of us: Ray Stark, Neil, myself, and Richard. And Neil said, "Oh my God, I know exactly what to do." And he said, "Give me 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it was." And he wrote The Goodbye Girl, which the end of the picture is actually sort of where Bogart Slept Here began.
Wow. That's really, really interesting. Do you think the problem was the script, and or was it De Niro?
No, I think it was. I think Neil was correct. I think it really was that. I mean, once you become successful, the issues of what success is are not really interesting to the broad spectrum of people. Also, along with this, you have to understand that the Goodbye Girl was a small picture. I mean, we didn't expect it to be what it was, what it became. Um, it was, it was just this kind of lovely picture. And there weren't that many family, quote unquote, oriented pictures, because Taxi Driver was sort of the prevalent mood of movies. It was dark, it was gritty, it was about drugs and the 70s. You know what I mean? It was all about that. And so when the cards started to come in at the local theaters where we previewed it, the cards were reading, "Oh my God, thank God, a picture I can take my kids to. Oh my God, I'm so happy." And single women were just knocked out because it was the first time that they had seen themselves being portrayed in a sympathetic light, you
Mm.
know? Trying to make ends meet, raising a kid on your own, falling in love, being scared, all of those things, you know, were really, it touched the heartbeat of a lot of people.
Well, and
That,
what was so cool about what you did with Paula is, I mean, you gave her this life outside of just, needing a man. There was much more depth there to her. And
yeah, yeah. Well, it was all in the script. I really do believe that. It's, yes, I think actors can help a script a little bit, but if it isn't on the page, it's not on the stage. You know what I mean?
well, yeah, you received your second Golden Globe, and you tied with Diane Keaton. And then your second Oscar nomination. And I have the magazine back there where People Magazine called it the closest Best Actress race in years. Because it was you, Jane Fonda, Shirley MacLaine, Diane, and Anne Bancroft. Did you think maybe that year you had a chance?
No, I never, I would, no,
No.
no. Now, the
uh,
only year I thought maybe might work was only When I Laugh. I was really proud of that work. Not that I wasn't proud of the others, I was.
yeah. Well,
But in general, romantic comedies, but then Woody helped prove that wrong. So,
yeah, yeah. And you got to show off your crazy comic chops in The Cheap Detective. Oh my God. It was just so much fun with Peter Falk and that
yes,
incredible
I
cast.
loved it. In fact, it was kind of fun because at first, Lily Tomlin was supposed to play the role.
Oh,
And she had her clothes, everything. And Neil was into pre-production, and I was going to be his assistant. And Lily had a conflict with her one-person show, the Round the World, the
Search for Signs.
yeah. And I blurted out one day, "Let me audition," because I loved the character. And Neil didn't think, at first he went, nah. I said, come on, let me try. So I did. And they put it on screen and he looked at it and he said, okay.
Oh, it was so great. And, I'm not giving anything away because,
No.
people have seen it. The end, the fact that, you were responsible for all of it was just genius. Then came Promises in the Dark by Jerome Hellman, which is just this searing, character study more than anything else. How did that come about?
Um, he called me up and said that as a producer, it was going to be his directorial debut. And we met and walked on the beach, and I met his wife, who was lovely, and she became a friend, Nancy Allison. And I said, "Yeah, okay, this interests me." But I have to do some research about being a surgeon and everything. I went to, big hospitals down in LA and witnessed surgery and all kinds of stuff like that. But Jerry, was a producer of some phenomenal films, so I knew that he had great taste, and I felt that it'd be okay, and it was, and I loved the idea of the story too, because again, there was another woman who was a career person and didn't take anything from a man, um, and wasn't that interested in it and cared about her career. So I liked that especially.
And the steps she takes at the end, when you think about it, we're still debating all that today.
Exactly. Yeah,
Uh,
totally.
then chapter 2, which started life as a play, which you opted not to do. What was it as autobiographical as it seemed?
There are sections that are extremely autobiographical. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it isn't in the sense that there aren't two girls, daughters. But the essence of what Neil was writing was true. Um, and there were sentences that I said that I did say in real life that wound up on the page, especially that big speech,
Oh,
at the crux of it all.
yeah, yeah.
That
What a potent speech.
said to him later, I said, "Wait, did you record that?" I mean, I was like, but he also showed me, by then, we were in Hollywood, we were in LA, I mean, and living, and we were having a good time and all of that. And he showed me scenes as he was writing it. And we had discussions about it.
Yeah.
It was very collaborative. So it was really kind of wonderful.
That's a terrific performance. And I find that Jenny is a far more interesting character than George. She just is. I mean, you can say that's on the page, but I think that's you.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was your third nomination. And it was like, it's so funny because you nominated constantly in these like very combative years in terms of these great performances. Sally Field won that year for Norma Ray, which you turned down, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious if you, I hate the word regret.
It was part of the agreement with Neil, because he didn't want me to go away for 8 weeks.
Wow.
Um, and so I had to make a decision. Um, I wanted to do it badly. And actually, if I had been a little bit more aware and maybe a little higher consciousness, I would have tested it perhaps. But I felt that I couldn't, because I was in a committed relationship, a marriage with two girls, and I just, what are you going to do? But, and also Neil was, a generation older than me. And so he had a very different perspective on women.
Wow.
Yeah.
Marsha, were there other roles that you wish you would have accepted? Were there any others?
Well, Patty wanted me to do network,
Oh, wow.
but Neil didn't like that idea. Yeah. I don't know if that would have ultimately happened or not because I think Faye Dunaway was pretty amazing and wonderful. So, and it would have been a very, very different script. And he and Neil were close friends. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but he did call me and ask me to read it. And but I Neil got very competitive.
Wow. Well,
Yeah,
you mentioned that him and Patty were close friends, and I was watching that clip of the Oscars the year Vanessa Redgrave gave her speech,
yeah,
and I noticed that when Patty countered with what he said, Neil was applauding madly. It's very interesting.
that is interesting. Yeah.
So 1981 brought Glenn Jordan's Only When I Laugh, which is probably my favorite Marsha performance on screen to date so far. Um, there is something so truthful about Georgia and what you do with her. And this it goes to such a dark place, much more so than most Simon's work.
Yeah, that's true.
Was that something that you knew you wanted going in?
Um, Neil came up with the idea of rewriting the Gingerbread Lady. Um, and to be perfectly honest, I can't exactly remember, excepting that he he showed me the very opening and I got chills. I knew exactly what to do. Also, my family were big drinkers, so I understood the whole issue of alcoholism and stuff like that, and also an estrangement to a child because of, in an odd way, the reverse for with Ellen and Nancy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and also, I was just at the top of my game because I was continually working. Do you know what I mean? So I was in a big flow of creative energy and everything, which was really really wonderful. And I was that's why I just thought it was some of my best work. Um, And so did Neil. In fact, it surprised him, I think, in some ways, you know.
Yeah, the camaraderie you established with Joan Hackett and James Coco too.
Oh, I loved them. Yeah. Well, that was the other thing too about the writing because people weren't, you didn't have five characters in a movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's hard to see that now. I mean, sometimes they do it if they're unknowns and young, but not grown-ups, you know?
yeah, you're right, and it's a shame.
Yeah. It's kind of a throwback to, what the 40s were like when you had character actors who were stars, like,
Like the
Monty.
women, right?
Who?
The women with
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a surprise Oscar nomination, since it was another crazy crowded year, and then that was the Katharine Hepburn won that year. But you said that that might have been the one where you thought, because I think that was so up in the air. I was old enough to be following the Oscars then, and
But I knew the minute that Rooster Cogburn movie came out, that that was going to be that you just can't run up against that.
well, And then you reteamed with Herb Ross for Max Dugan Returns, which I think is this underrated little gem of a movie.
I love that movie. I love that movie.
It's so great. And it's you, Donald Sutherland, Matthew Broderick, Jason Robards. Oh my God.
Oh my God, is right. And what I loved about it was I to come up with, I think it was 5 or 6 different surprises that Jason Robards as my father presents. And to do that believably, I had long talks with her about it because I thought, what are we going to do now? You know what I mean? The house, the car, the kid, you know? Yeah.
Marsha, how much was Neil involved in his films? Like, was he always on set?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He often rewrote while he was, especially because we did get a chance to rehearse, which they don't do much anymore. For example, with the Goodbye Girl, we were on the set with the cast for uh, I think 8 days
Wow.
of rehearsal because Quinn was 7, you
Yeah.
know, but Herbert was working out the shots, and that's what we did. Yeah. So, but that was a lot of fun. There's something to be said too, you have the same cameraman, wind up with the same director, you begin, it's a little bit like repertory in the sense that you have a shortened language with each other. You can trust each other. You know that they have your back as an actor. And I loved it because the challenges in the material were all so exciting and wonderful to attempt.
I'm curious about your process. You make there's an interesting tidbit in your autobiography about Bobby De Niro and how he was asking certain questions on Bogart Slept Here, and at one point he asked you if you wanted to sleep on the set with him.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, he got really in. Do
Yeah.
you take a character home with you at night?
You, I try not to because I had a family, for the most part, and we didn't want it. We made an agreement. We never discussed business at the dinner table. It was all about the girls. But I do remember, for example, I don't know if it was before. I think it might have been before. Only When I Laugh, we took a trip to Ireland, and I was just so edgy and irritable and everything. And Neil suddenly turned to me and he said, "Oh, he said, you're going to be fine." He said, "You're just starting a picture, that's all." So he knew something about, my process, even perhaps before I did. But I was able to leave it because I kept it all the time we were shooting. I just went straight back to my trailer. I stayed in the mood. I read acting books. I, meditated. I did whatever I had to do to be prepared for the next scene or whatever.
Oh, I have to say to you, because I'm a writer myself, and I feel like you do yourself a little bit of a disservice. I think that it's you that elevated Neil's work on screen. I'm talking about, to another level, because I feel that Neil's work is great, but sometimes it lacks nuance because those one-liners need to be paramount. And I
Yeah.
think you were able to transcend that and force this three-dimensionality almost in your performances. I think it's obvious, and I think after you stop working with Neil, if you look at his films afterwards, they all suffer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of true because I was so hell bent on um, it has to be honest, you know? Somehow I had to find an honest way to say it. Yeah.
And speaking to that truth, in 1985, you did a TV movie called Surviving,
Oh, yeah.
directed by Waris Hussein, and it's a heartbreaking look at teen suicide. You and Ellen Burstyn had a couple of killer scenes together.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. And we actually shot separately. You know, Molly Ringwald was my daughter, and she had the son, Gallagher, Zach Gallagher?
Zach Galligan. Yep.
Galligan. And so we wound up shooting different days. I mean, the only time we ever came together, if we did, would be that one time, I think, when,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
It was
And I like
heart-wrenching.
that we kept it separate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you did Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood. Was that fun?
Yes, it was. It was great. I was, by then, you know, I was feeling like the business was all about youth orientation and stuff like that. And he asked me to come to his office and we had a nice chat. I didn't read the material then, or maybe he sent it to me ahead of time. I'm not sure. Um, but I had heard stories from friends of mine who had worked with him. One that sometimes he'd only do one or two takes and move on, even if the actor, you know, wasn't happy with it, or that he didn't want women to be wearing any kind of makeup. And so when I went to the meeting, I said to him, well, I hear you, you know, one or two takes. I said, what happens if, you know, and he said, look, he said, there are two different kinds of stories or film. He said, one is character driven and the other is story driven. He said, when it's story driven, I know exactly what I want to say and I move on. He said, when it's character driven, like this one is, he said, we'll do as many takes as necessary until we get what we want. So he said, and don't worry about the makeup. So I said, okay. So I remember one of my favorite things, two favorite things on that movie. Um, First day, I was a night shot in the little craft house off the base down in San Diego. And I walked into this location, and it was swarming with people in this small little house. And I couldn't see Clint anywhere in the midst of it. I looked and looked and looked. And then slowly, very, very slowly, things started to disperse and people were sent off. And there in the middle of it was Clint. But the thing that was so remarkable to me was that his energy as an individual was not about collecting the attention or the energy being focused on him. It was on everything else that was happening. And he was quietly going around just doing it, but you didn't even see him and do it. And then the second thing was we shot the little night scene outside where we danced on a little parquet dance floor outside with some Chinese lanterns. And we had dialogue and we had to dance. And he was, of course, directing the picture. And the cameraman, cinematographer, was using a handheld. And so we did the scene, and he was moving me around the floor, but not it as a dance move. I got the feeling that I was being moved in a very different way, and I just wasn't exactly sure what was happening. So after he turned to the camera and said, "Did you get that?" And he said, "Yeah." Um, I said, what What were you doing?" I said, "I got the feeling that you were moving me in different ways." And he said, "Oh," he said, "I was just watching the light to make sure it played across your face in a lovely way." So
Wow.
I was like, "You danced, you directed, you said your dialogue, and you acted." So all on this little tiny parquet floor. I couldn't believe it. It was really pretty cool. And there was another time we were standing next to each other while we were waiting for a setup. And he was in a t-shirt and everything, and just sitting there with standing there with his arms closed. And so the two of us were there, and he was going. I said, "What are you singing?" He said, "Oh, it's a 1932 horn, blah, 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 from jazz, Coltrane, whatever." It was just stunning to me. His interests. His interests were amazing. He's really great. I mean, I don't agree with his politics, but that's okay.
Yeah. And he's still directing.
And he's still directing. He's
Yeah.
still directing.
Um, then you made a TV movie with Albert Finney, with
Oh, yes.
yeah, The Image, which the theme of rushing to judgment is so timely still.
I know. Don't you wonder what happened to all those films? I wish people would show those. They were kind of interesting. Well, of course, maybe not. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's too dated. I don't know.
I don't think so. No, I thought it was. Yeah, I just saw it again a couple nights ago, and
Yeah. Oh, wow.
yeah,
How did you find it?
I got the DVD. Yeah, got the
Wow.
DVD. I think you can find it because it was an HBO movie. I think they have it on HBO, whatever it's called.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I had a wonderful time with Albert. That was really cool. Yeah.
Wow. And then you had a foray into sitcoms with James Brooks called
Yep.
Sibs.
Dibs. Yeah.
I wish I had known about that.
Episodes.
How many?
I think we did 26. They played in Malaysia somewhere.
Wasn't a great experience, was it?
No, no. No, it wasn't. It was a very kind of loosey goosey way to work, the way they did it. And it kind of was, I think in part because Jim was, there's no question that he's talented and did wonderful movies. But a comedy, a live comedy for camera, that's a completely different beast, I think. And it was fascinating to have the experience of having done Sibs and then go and do Kelsey Grammer and David Hyde Pierce,
Frasier.
where I was supposed to be hired for just the one shot and then wound up doing 5 or 6 of them. And it was just such a different environment. I saw how it can work, and the way Jim and his crew was trying to do it was, I guess, because it was a first time, maybe. I don't know. Although, God, he had all those years on Taxi, so
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
yeah. It just wasn't, sometimes it's like with the Goodbye Girl. Sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then, like you did do Frasier, and you did The Middle, and also Grace and Frankie.
Yes.
Um,
I'm
uh,
going back in August. I think yeah, Arlene is coming back for the last season. Yes.
nice. Well, how's working with Jane and Lily?
Oh, that's great. And Marta and the directors, the writers. It's a very, very warm, open, fun, lovely set. It's really, really. it's a trip. It's really great. And the two of them, they are so funny in life. They are those characters now.
Wow. That's
They
great.
really are. I mean, they're just as cute as can be. And Peter Gallagher and Swoosie, I loved all of it. They're all great. Yeah. So I'm excited that I get to go back one more time.
Do you stay friendly? You know, when I was younger, I had this like crazy idea that all the Oscar nominees in their categories became friends, but then it became like, no, they're competitive. Where does the truth lie? Like, are you friends with Jane Fonda, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I mean, when you're in the same business and everything, but also Jane and I were on Broadway at the same time together. She did 33 variations, and I was doing Impressionism.
yeah.
And so there was that connection also. So, um, yeah.
Well, before we turn to your stage career, I have a quick question about your racing career. What?
Yeah, no, I was serious. I mean, when you think about it, Hot Rod Hullabaloo was probably not that far away from my interests, because when I was in high school, one of my best friends' father bought a kind of rundown track outside of St. Louis. And on Sundays, we'd go to early mass, and then I'd get to pass out the pit passes. On the straightaway, they did all the quarter mile stuff with the funny cars and the rails and what all their names are now. I don't even know. But I just got so curious because these guys, with their cigarettes rolled up in their sleeves, unpacking pieces of the machinery and oilcloth and focused on the whole thing and the smell and the sounds and the loudness and the speed and the whole craziness of it was just very, very intriguing. So years later, I'm on a plane with Paul Newman going to LA from New York. And I said to him, because we were socially friends, he and Joanne, and I said, "What are you doing in LA?" He said, "Oh, I'm headed out to Riverside. They're going to close that track. It'll be the last race." And I knew that Paul was, very interested in racing and all of that stuff. And I went, "Oh, racing." And he said, "Why? You want to come out?" I said, "Oh, could I?" So I went out for the weekend, and I hung out with the crew for the entire weekend and watched the race and just stayed out of the way and, just took it in. And so I said to the crew chief, I said, "Where do you go next?" And he told me, and he said, "You want to come along?" I said, "Could I?" And he said, "Sure." He said, I'll check it with Paul, but I think it'll be great." So I started traveling when I could to watch the whole crew, prepare, do whatever it was. So finally, Paul turned to me and said, "God, what have I wrought?" He said, "Why don't you go to racing school?" And I said, "I didn't even know they had them." And he said, "Sure." So he called up Bob Bondurant, and I went off to racing school in Arizona. And then I went to Russell's school. I went to Skip Barber's school. And then in one of my classes, you usually take a 4-day, 5-day class. I hooked up with a lawyer friend, Mark Steinberg, and he said, "I'm going to buy myself a little car and, do a little mom and pop thing." And I was still in LA at the time. And I said, "Oh, I'd like to do that." And he said, "Well, there's this little Mazda that's available in Rialto." And so I go out and I meet this kid and I buy this car. And I took the class, the SCCA class, and they put a big X on the back of your car so that everybody knows you're a newbie, and hopefully you don't get into trouble. And we began to kind of have a little mom and pop type team with volunteers and stuff at racing. Then Mike Lewis, who was a championship GT3 driver who drove Mazdas, he was there. And when we would get into, if I got into trouble with some mechanical issues, his crew chief would come over and help us or give us some advice and stuff like that. So Mike called me up one day and said, "You want to do an arrive and drive?" I said, "Oh, I'd love it." So basically, I took his car, sold or gave away the one I was racing at the time, and joined with Mike, and we wound up doing it for about 6, 7 years. We had the big truck, we had cars, we had a crew, and I made the Valvoline runoffs 4 times. I came in the top 4 of the Southern Pacific Division. So, yeah,
Wow, brava. That's amazing.
yeah.
Okay, well, big shift now to your stage work, which is so extensive. Your first 2 major theater credits were by authors, Deer Park and Happy Birthday Wanda June. Then you did Cactus Flower on Broadway, and you did Private Lives, which led to The Good Doctor. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Um, I auditioned, I think, 9 times, 9 different times for Cactus Flower, and eventually got hired. Um, this is a little bit like the movie story. I got hired to play Botticelli Springtime, which was a supporting role. And the young lady that was the ingenue lead, her contract was finishing on a Saturday, I believe it was. And the understudy, or the new person coming in, hadn't been signed by the Merrick office, and something happened between the contractual issue of the understudy, the person, and myself, because I was to understudy Tony, but not until Monday. Do you see what I'm saying? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, somebody said, "No, I'm not coming back," and they were without a Tony. But I had not had any rehearsal. So I did what I did when I did the Private Lives. I memorized everything over the weekend and said, "I can do it."
Okay.
And this wonderful female stage manager, I think her name was May Muth or something like that. She said, "Honey, you better deliver, because my head is on the block if you don't." I said, "No, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it." So that Monday, the Merrick office came down and said, "Who the hell is this girl?" But I got through it. Everybody was happy. And they said, "Okay, you can take it out on the road." So I wound up doing the national tour, for about 8 months or 9 months. And then the 2 off-Broadway shows, the very first one was Norman Mailer on the Deer Park. And that too, the same thing happened. I was playing a small role. I was understudying Beverly, who was then Norman's wife, and she was in it. And she had a mild car accident with her Bentley or something
God.
for a matinee. So I had to go out with the book, which you do in the theater sometimes, because the show must go on. So these kind of extraordinary things, just led me to feel that I could do anything. So when the private lives came up, I said to my agent, he said, well, look, they want somebody who's done it before because there's only a week rehearsal, blah, blah. And I didn't know who Francis Ford Coppola was because nothing in his career was not happening yet. The Godfather hadn't been done yet, out. But I said, lie and tell them I've done that. And I said, I promise you won't get into trouble. I'll tell them that I'm the only one that lied and, blah, blah. So I memorized it over the weekend and flew off to San Francisco and showed up for the first day of rehearsal, not having done the play. And these people who had been doing it all season long were coming back from vacation. And we had our week of rehearsal. And then Francis and Bill Ball, the artistic director, came to see the show. And Francis said, come with me after we did the final run through for him. He said, we're going to take a drive. And I said, okay. And so there was this incredible Mercedes outside the theater, which had just come off the boat. And it turned out that it was the prize of a bet that he and Al Ruddy had made with, I believe, Paramount, that the Godfather wouldn't earn $19 million at the box office. And of course, it's history. So this was the prize. And he had just picked up this car. This incredible special Mercedes had come off the boat. And we got in and you could smell the leather and everything. And he said, listen, you're going to be fine in the role. No worries. He said, just be careful in the fight scene. You can maybe get a little too contemporary in your hand gestures. You have to remember that you're the richest woman in the world. So he said, I do something that reminds you, memorize the smell of this car and everything. And he said, he said Marlon Brando used a little pinky ring that he made two sizes too small, so it looked like he had it forever. And he said, and the cat was also another way for him to remember who he was as the character. And he said, of course, he put things in his mouth, but he said, don't do that because that doesn't work. But he said, so get yourself the most expensive underwear and lingerie. And I said, on my salary, $250 a week. So I said, okay. Okay. So he dropped me back at the theater, and there was a little French perfume place. I went in, bought the most expensive perfume that was the heaviest scent I could imagine. And I sprayed my wig, my underwear, my costume, a handkerchief with it so that I would always remember that I was the richest woman in the world and I did not have contemporary gestures in the fight scene.
Has that been helpful throughout?
Actually, from that moment on, I did pick scents for every character. In fact, in Max Dugan, because she was a teacher in Venice, California, and a single mother, I thought, maybe a kind of hippie, and my clothes were sort of, that 70s hippie, Carly Simon sort of look. And I got a natural oil perfume thing called Rain. I thought, oh, perfect. So I put it all on. I go and I'm walking into the set, and the producer passes by and he went, Marsha, hi. And then somebody else can, whoa, what have you got on? So I had to change it because it was terrible. It's on me. But that was the only time.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I saw you on Broadway in Night of the Iguanas, Steel Magnolias, and Impressionism, which I thought was actually really good. It was much better than and what it was the way it was received.
I know. It was a shame, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a good play.
Yeah, it was. I had a good time with that one. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite stage experience overall?
Well, uh, I I have a couple actually. One is from Steel Magnolias. Franny Sternhagen and I were faced out front under those hair dryers and everything, and we had magazines or something, and there is an exchange that is just so fabulously funny and wonderful to do and requires exquisite timing. And Franny and I had the best time doing this section. The cracks, and they were cracks, they were like claps of laughter. They rang out so long and so hard that we after a while you couldn't hold it. I would have the magazine up in front of my face because there wasn't anything to do but let them, have a good time. So that I'll never forget that. That was really pretty spectacular. I loved that, being able to land those kind of jokes. And then the other experience that I had a couple at ACT where I was doing Doll's House. And there are moments when another actor would appreciate this, I think, is there are moments when you are just being. You're just you're in the flow, you're in the source of it. And there was this moment where I suddenly felt like I was this bird in a cage, and my arms just literally ran, and I ran towards the window, which was not actually quite the blocking, but it wouldn't have thrown anybody. And I felt like I had gotten elevated. I thought I didn't couldn't feel my feet on the floor. And it was like, and there was this audible, supposedly, fortunately, it was a matinee, and I had two friends in the audience, and they told me that they came backstage and they said that moment, they said the audience gasped. And I don't remember hearing it, you know what I mean? But there, once in a great while, you have those kind of moments where you just get a frisson of something that makes you feel you accomplished something very, very special as an actor. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, you've recently taken part in and you've directed some Zoom readings. What are your thoughts on film versus TV versus theater versus Zoom? All.
Well, I love it all because it's all a little different. And all my work in film, I think, helps me with Zoom because, especially if they're recording plays that the actors have done on stage. Because when you're this close, like we are, and the camera is literally about a foot away from you, you have to be aware of that. Do you know what I mean? So there are those kinds of things. And I've enjoyed doing it for that reason, that I learned something new about performing no matter what. I think everybody should write once. You don't have to ever have anybody see it, but do make the attempt. You have to act once and you have to direct once so that you have an appreciation of what the other discipline is really about. You gain a kind of respect for other directors when you've had to direct yourself, you know?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No.
Important. I mean, assuming you even want to. If you don't want to, that's fine, you know.
Um, if you could award yourself a Marsha for your personal best in film, what movie would it be for?
I guess it would be, only when I laugh. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. What?
Well, that's two votes.
Yeah. I think if more people saw it, one of the things that bothers me about the way, and I could go off on this and I won't, but the way certain companies versus other companies put out DVDs, Blu-rays, and digital,
Yeah, they
I
were very slow on only when I laugh for some reason. I'm
am
not going to.
barely promoting it. You know what I mean? Like, come on, this is an Academy three Oscar nominations.
Yeah.
Uh, but what's up next for you, Marsha?
Um, a couple of things. I'm going out to LA to do Grace and Frankie in August.
Right.
And also, I'm going to direct and star in Lost in Yonkers at Hartford Stage here in Connecticut, and then maybe Two Rivers in New Jersey after that. We'll see. And then also, I have two projects that one I'm writing, which is a musical of a movie I did called Drop Dead Fred.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And I'm writing the book with the writer, Tony Fingleton, and we're attempting to write the book. So we'll see how that goes. And that we have some interest in Australia, so that could be very exciting. And then there's another project of Tony's that I'm doing. He wrote a film called Swimming Upstream with Jeffrey Rush and Judy Davis,
Great
Australian
film.
film about two young boys, swimmers in the Australian Championships in the 50s. And we're doing it for the stage. And I see it as a director as a theatrical event and using acrobats for swimming instead of water.
Wow.
So those are the biggies that that I am occupied with right now.
Well, I want to thank you for the gifts you've given us. I think the camera loves you.
Oh, thanks.
And I think I'll end with you can have the last word on what do you think the biggest misconception about you is, if there is any, or if there's something you want to let people know about yourself that they might not know.
Well, I do feel that the way the business has moved is away from acting per se as a proper craft and personality. So I just wish that the powers that be wouldn't lump people into their quote unquote qualities or brands or whatever you want to call it, where, oh, well, let's get that kind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And look instead at giving, especially the young actors, an opportunity to learn a craft.
Thank you so much, Marsha Mason. Thank you.
You're welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for a really lovely interview, too.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.